Yeah, I really don't know what to say for these anymore.
The Shadow Rising is the fourth book in the Will of Tom series, written by Robert and Jordan. And yeah, let's just get started. I'm going off script. I don't have a script for this one. Didn't have time to write one, so let's hope I don't ramble too much. So let's go with a story. So the story kicks off with Rand in Tyr. So I guess at this point I should throw a spoiler warning up. It's getting to the point where I can't keep any who the Dragon Reborn is secret, and the Dragon Reborn is Rand al'Thor. So to me it's sort of obvious. But Rand is in Tyr. He's holding a crown. He is the king of Tyr, and he's changing the laws. He's changing everything, and that's where the book starts. Perrin goes back to the Two Rivers, and Matt tries to leave. But the three main characters, Matt, Perrin, and Rand, are all Ta'veren, like I talked about in the last Wheel of Time video. And they can't really leave each other unless they just absolutely have to. And Perrin just absolutely has to leave and go back to the Two Rivers because he heard that something's going down in the Two Rivers, something bad, something that he needs to go check on. So he goes and checks on that, and just to kind of keep Rand from having to. And Rand puts Kalendor, the sword that he got in the Dragon Reborn, he puts it into the Stone of Tyr, into the heart of the stone. He puts it there forcefully, like he makes it a part of the stone, I guess. He uses the power. It causes an earthquake to happen for a pretty good radius. And after that, Matt and Rand, Egwene, all leave off for the Aiel Waste. And this is probably my favorite part of the book. And Rand goes to Ruidian there, and that's a place where Clan Chief goes. There's a lot of world building in this book, and I can't wait to get there to talk about it. And Rand goes to Ruidian. He comes back out. You learn a lot of cool stuff about the Aiel. And then they go and they have a meeting in the Golden Bowl. He tells them the secret, the cool stuff about the Aiel that no Aiel is supposed to know about except for Clan Chief and Wise Ones. And the book ends. That's the end of the book. I don't want to go into too much to avoid as many spoilers as I can. And like I said, I don't have a script. So, yeah. On to world building. So the world building in the Shadow Rising is probably my favorite. I say every aspect of every one of these books is my favorite, it seems like. But the world building in The Rising Shadow is my favorite, and that's definitive. The world building in this is the Aiel. That's it. That's really it. That's the only big world-shattering or world-changing event that happens, is going to meet the Aiel, and they are a huge part of the series. They slowly lose relevance over time, like every other sort of minor things, or they might gain relevance in certain parts and lose them, as in every aspect of a story. But the Aiel are my favorite, and just their culture is super in-depth. How they treat servants. They don't have servants, they have what are called Gaishine. And they are people that were captured in battle, and they have to serve 1 year and 1 day. They're indentured servants, basically, and they're not allowed to touch weapons. And they're a warrior people, and just how they deal with that, and just their different cultures. They're polygamists. It's very strange to the people of what they call the wetlands, because the Aiel Waste is very dry. It has no water there, and the polygamy is weird to us too. But the Aiel are so great, you just kind of look over it, and they have this really strange sense of humor. They're scared of water. Every single one of them doesn't like water, and they are scared. I think a lot of them are more scared to not of water, but of wasting water, since they don't have it, and a puddle like this big gets fought over in the waste. It said many times that certain Aiel have seen people get killed over a puddle that you could step across, and their leadership system is just amazing. This is more of a cult. This is turning into more of a culture discussion or analysis than world building, but the world building in the Rising Shadow just takes what was already there, the already amazing world building of the last book and the book before, and just adds a whole new section of this giant continent and this giant world, and I love it. So let's just move right on to character. I think as this video series has gone on, and as I've done the Wheel of Time reviews, I feel like character has kind of evolved more into character development. How have characters developed instead of how well they are written, how relatable they are, and are they believable. My 3 bullet point notes on how to write that category. And I think that's a good place for it to change into. And the character development in The Shadow Rising is good. I mean, it's not the biggest development. It's not the Dragon Reborn kind of big for Rand. It's not that. It's not some of the later books, and it's not the first book really for character development. This is a very kind of neutral book. You kind of see Rand take on leadership because people are kind of listening to him more. He's turning into more of a military leader, but even that starts to take place more in the next book when there's another thing that he does that really requires him to become a military leader and more of a king than he really is now. But you kind of see the stress weighing down on him. You see Perrin trying to decide whether he needs to stay with Rand or go to the Two Rivers, and ultimately, of course, he picks the Two Rivers, and kind of how he, I guess, takes on or acquires the leadership positions, and how he reacts to them. That's the word. How he reacts to the leadership positions that he's given. And Matt is just trying to figure out what his purpose in the books are, and what his purpose in this whole story of the world basically ending. And I think all the characters are developed well. I think Egwene has the biggest in this, where she goes from this kind of bratty teenage girl to this more dignified woman as the book goes on, because she's staying with the Aiel, and you really see that through the next few books, and that really starts in this book. So her character development is good. But that's just the word to describe the character development in The Rising Shadow. Shadow Rising. I've done that 4 times now. But that's the word to describe it. It's just good. It's not great. It's not perfect. But we'll see how that affects its final score. But let's move on now to pacing. The pacing in the Shadow Rising is good. It's like the other 2 books. It's kind of the first few 100 pages. I think this one was about 200 in the paperback book pages are kind of slow, kind of setting up the rest of the story. Then it hits the ground running, and it kind of follows the Miss Peregrine style of, even though it might be slower in some places, you always want the next page. Sometimes I don't think the Wheel of Time suffers in pacing. I think it suffers more in, can it keep your attention long enough? And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with pacing. But the way the Shadow Rising, not Rising Shadow, Shadow Rising, I think that's how it works. How the pacing in it works is, it might, even though it might be slow, in some places it makes up for it in engagement, and that's not a category, but I think it should be. I think that kind of goes hand in hand with pacing. Can you tell this isn't scripted? But the pacing is good. I like the pacing in The Rising Shadow. Shadow Rising. That's going to be the death of me. Let's just move on to the final verdict before I pull my hair out. So the final verdict for the Shadow Rising is 10 out of 10. And really the 10 out of 10 comes from world building, the culture of the Aiel, the kind of the interactions of the Wetlanders versus the Aiel, and it's great. I love the Aiel. The story is really good. The pacing is like all the other books besides the first one. First 100 pages slow. First 100, I think it was through about 250, 300 pages in the paperback book, and I know that sounds like a lot, but that's out of 960 something, so you still got 600 pages to play around with. And the story, like I said, is good. The pacing is still good, even though it's kind of, like I said, slow at the beginning. World building, great. The only thing that it's lacking in, I believe, is character development, but it doesn't need it. Not every book has to progress your characters super far like The Dragon Reborn did for Rand. But I think it does its job, and it gets a 10 out of 10, and it is my favorite book. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. Sorry for the unscriptedness of it. It was very rambly, and tomorrow I hope it will be scripted. It will either be the Fires of Heaven, the 5th book in the Wheel of Time series, or Hollow City by Ransom Riggs, the 2nd book in the Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children series. And I will see you then.